Well, we've got some more news on the Supreme Court rulings handed down last week. One of them on affirmative action, another on student loan forgiveness, and a case that allows businesses to refuse service to LGBTQ Americans if they have a religious objection. Conservatives in Congress and across the country applauded those decisions. Democrats on Capitol Hill united against them. Polling, perhaps, though, is less cut and dried. A Washington Post poll late last year showed 63% of Americans were against considering race in college admissions. Only 36% agree with that idea. For the ruling on refusing LGBTQ people's services, results vary widely based on how the poll's question is asked. In a Pew poll from a few months back, 60% of American adults said they were in favor of a business refusing to provide service in situations where it could suggest support for LGBTQ issues for which they have a religious objection. And a recent NBC News poll that asked if voters supported President Loan's student loan forgiveness plan showed 44% say it was a bad idea versus 43% in favor. Let's bring in Director of Polling at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University, John Della Volpe. He's an MSNBC contributor and author of the book titled Fight: How Gen Z is Channeling Their Fear and Passion to Save America. That's now out in paperback. John, good morning. So you got some new polling for us today. What are some of your takeaways about how young people are feeling about what's happening at the Supreme Court and beyond?
Thanks, Willie, for having me. Yes, this is a review of a couple of decades of polling that we've been conducting at the Harvard Institute of Politics. And essentially, when I look at younger voters, 18 to 29-year-olds, mostly Gen Z, keep in mind that this cohort, 18 to 29-year-olds, with their older millennial brothers and sisters, will be about 40% of the electorate. And when I look at this cohort today compared to this place in the 2020 cycle, I find that younger people are less likely to vote. They're less likely to identify as Democrat. They are less likely to follow the news. And they are less likely, importantly, to believe that politics can make a tangible difference in the country and in their lives individually.
And that's just a frustration with the system that they have watched since they were born fail them again and again in so many different ways. So what is your sense of the way these Supreme Court decisions, John, may impact the energy to go out and vote, the energy to become active in the process?
Yeah, I think, Willie, the combination of the Supreme Court and the Republican Congress, we talking about baseball, it's like a hanging curveball over the plate for Democrats. But Democrats need to identify that and to take advantage of that. This is just the second year in a row where younger people continue to feel under attack. A year ago, of course, we know it's a third of women losing, a third of women in individual states losing control of their reproductive health. And today we see kind of attacks on members of the LGBTQ community. We see it more difficult for working class and people of color to attend college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's one attack after another, and that's just by the Supreme Court. You know, earlier you talked about what's happening in Florida and other places like that as well, in terms of this generation really responding, I think, hopefully to kind of stand up and get the backs of those who are more vulnerable even than themselves.
And Mara, last year we saw a seismic shift after the Dobbs decision, completely energizing women, in particular young women, to go out and vote in the midterm elections and changing the face of our politics.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions I have looking at that data is whether there's anything that can actually bring some of those voters back. I mean, you saw much higher turnout, for example, in states like Michigan, where their abortion was a direct ballot issue. So is that something that not only Democrats, but those who support women's right to choose, for example, need to look at? And the Democratic Party should be looking at this data and should be concerned. I mean, it also really puts that question to the White House. What can this president really do about the loan forgiveness failure at SCOTUS? Because there are a lot of Americans who are extremely demoralized by that decision. That's exactly the kind of group that you want to show up at the polls. Remember that there's a close alignment between college voters and Democrats at this point. Excuse me, college people with a college degree and Democrats. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of data to parse here. I don't know that these voters are moving over to the Republican Party. They're just becoming inactive. The larger question of what it says about our politics is pretty depressing, as we've been saying this morning, some depressing news to parse through, because it suggests that there's not much trust in the system. And this is a generation of kids, of people, of young people who have been failed, as you said, by the failure of gun control, climate change, and now the collapse of the Democratic coalition, it seems, or the risk of it, with the rise of fascism. So it's depressing times, and I think we need those voters back in this system. We need a competitive system, and you can't just lose an entire generation of voters.
Yeah, you think about it, though, just think about what has happened between the midterms and now. Right. During the midterms, when we think about Wisconsin, when we think about Michigan, and we think about the role of young voters, particularly in Wisconsin, in some places we were actually saying on this show that young folk actually helped save our democracy. But when I look at your numbers, John, I see the rate, the percentage of young people, Black, Hispanic, and white, who are disappointed in President Biden's performance. What is the relationship between what we saw in the midterms, that kind of energy, and these sorts of numbers? It's not like it's 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago. It's just a midterm. So help us understand these disapproval numbers with regards to the Biden administration.
Eddie, what we first need to understand is that without younger people, there isn't a Biden administration. It was young people in particular in the 5 battleground states in 2020, similar approach in 2022, which made the difference in state after state after state. And essentially, kind of the message of this, I think, research is that past results are no guarantee of future returns. The Democrats need to take this seriously and specifically talk about the tangible differences that the Biden administration has made. I don't believe in my lifetime there's been an agenda that's been more youth forward than the Biden agenda. When you look at bipartisan support for gun safety legislation, a couple generations hasn't happened since then. When you look at the record low employment in 17 states, I think, and a variety of other things like the significant investment climate, but they're not feeling it on a day-to-day basis. That's the concern. When I look at the significant news in Philadelphia on 95, I mean, that helps young people in particular, helps them get to work, helps them spend time with their young families, it helps people get back to work in terms of deliveries. That's something that specifically isn't just about building infrastructure, it's about impacting day-to-day lives. And that's the kind of message I think that needs to be delivered, not just from the president, but from everyone all the way down to dog catcher.
So, John, you talk to and work with Gen Z, millennial voters all the time. If you were speaking to the Biden campaign right now, if you were talking to Democrats, where would you tell them they need to put their emphasis to get them energized to go out and vote next year?
Well, Willie, whenever I'm invited to talk to Democrats, I bring my students with me, and I let them actually answer those questions. And I think that's something that we need to do more of. We need to have younger people kind of at the table. But I do think more than that, it's basically a two-step process to engage young people in voting. It's not just about persuasion. It's about kind of connecting with values and building kind of the infrastructure around the importance that politics can make. I believe we've had a party that's delegitimized the process, delegitimize politics, and we need to kind of improve that brand that can make a difference.
Director of Polling at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University, John Della Volpe. John, thanks so much for bringing us the numbers today. We appreciate it. And John, obviously this will be an emphasis for the Biden campaign as they turn the corner to the new year. They have to get this young coalition of voters to the polls.
Yeah, they know it. They were able to in 20. Democrats were able to, for the most part, in 22. But Donnie, this looms large. And the word I keep coming back to is enthusiasm. That is something that I think some Democrats are getting anxious about. We're seeing polls like this that show that young voters are disenchanted with the process, that they have seen blow after blow handed down by the Supreme Court and other institutions saying, this is not how I feel about things like abortion or gun rights or climate change or affirmative action or student loans. The list goes on and on. And we have seen that their polls suggest that Democrats, even a number of them who like President Biden and think he's done a good job, just aren't sure they really want him to run again. And that includes young voters. That includes voters of color. For all the structural advantages a president has, sometimes seeking re-election with a good record, the fear is that Democrats might not be enthusiastic enough, those especially voters on those swing voters, to come out again. And while we know that if it's Donald Trump on the other side, his base is going to be enthusiastic. There's going to be passion there. They're going to turn out. Is it risky for Democrats to say, well, hey, if Trump's the nominee, voters will be enthusiastic to turn out against him rather than for what we're offering?
That is where the passion is. The passion certainly is not for Joe Biden. And, when we talk to our contemporaries, I'm 65 years old, and you talk about Biden, what's the first concern? Age. Now imagine you're a 25-year-old voter. and you're saying, wait a second, it's just purely based on that. This is my country, and we're going to have an 80-year-old or an 82-year-old running the country. The age thing, as you know, this is not something that's complicated. As you go further down, younger, the age is going to become more and more of an issue. So there's no surprise that when you look for enthusiasm on the Democratic side, the leader, it's not there. Do I still think the passion against Trump will rule the day? Yes, but you're not going to get the passion for Biden, particularly as you skew younger.
But it's not a fantasy camp. You don't get to pick your candidate out of thin air, the one you love, right, Mara? It's a side-by-side comparison. You pick one over the other. And in this case, Joe Biden is it if you're a young Democrat.
You know, I think that policy can overcome some of this, not with every voter. Joe Biden, I think, the best advice is own your age. Be the coolest grandfather that America can imagine. And say, I care about my grandkids, the future, and he does this pretty well, actually. Get him out there talking about, passing the torch. What's he going to do for this young generation that he can actually, oversee from the White House? Make him look cooler than SCOTUS. I think that's kind of the best bet at this point. There's room to play if they're creative about it.